Hey, this is based on Critical Conditions meditation story video. Going to do my own video. Um, First of all, when before I started meditating, I had a lot of depression in my life and agitation and not so much social anxiety, but just social difficulties, and that created a lot of pain for me. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know what Buddha calls stress. I was in that condition for a lot of time. I had one thing that I had that still plagues me to this day, but not as much as before, is I would do a lot of useless ruminating, just thinking about things people said that I didn't like, and how I disagreed, and coming up with counter arguments. And I can see how that could be in some ways is a survival tactic, I guess you could call it, useful. But overall, I would have to say it was mostly a waste of time, and it caused a lot of pain for me. And the agitation also occurred because people said they could just say a couple of phrases that I disagreed with. I was just sitting there, not even part of their conversation, just overhearing what they had to say, and that just drove me into a frenzy. And if you look at the actual content of what they said, or the topics, or the opinions, or whatever, I mean, everybody has opinions, and really the disagreements were extremely minor, but it caused a lot of issues for me. And again, I'm not completely cured or whatever, but I'm way better, and I attribute meditation mostly to curing me of these difficulties. So when I first learned how to meditate, I had a couple of techniques. One of them is a friend told me how to meditate. She told me that they taught her how to meditate on sound. So I actually use sound all the time. White noise is something that's very soothing to me, like the cars that are rolling by right now. And I find that if I would focus on the noise, like waves at a beach, I could just zone out. And the thing that I like about that is all these voices in my head, all this agitation. I forgot to add depression. It would be gone. Not for long. It would come back, but for a brief instant. And with that depression, it's interesting because when the voices would leave, the physical feelings of depression would remain. And I early on read a Zen book where they talked about you could use that as a focus as well. And so I actually have used that feeling in your chest of, I don't know what you call it, this tightness, as a focus as well. And you're not happy about it, you're not feeding it, but you definitely just acknowledge that it's there, and it puts your brain or your mind on one point, and that one pointedness excludes the negativity. So I really love that aspect of meditation. I also meditate on the breath, but I'm not going to talk so much about those instructions because pretty much everybody talks about the breath. They're all over the place. So early on, I did have some limited success. I meditated for very short amounts of time. I think the whole time factor in meditation is very fascinating. There's a lot of back and forth on it, I guess. I don't know. I definitely understand that the experienced meditators will meditate for more than an hour, or more than 20 minutes, up to 2 hours is the absolute limit. I've heard from what I consider to be reliable sources. When Critical Condition talked about she would meditate for up to 2 hours, I knew that I kind of felt that her story was legit. This is for real. There's a lot of fakers out there, a lot of people that they're not even fakers. Some of them, they just don't know how to meditate, and they think that they do, and they're promoting their methods. So it's extremely confusing when you're first learning about meditation. I actually urge people to read as much as they can. I know you're gonna get a lot of confusion and stuff, but just read a lot. Try it for yourself. See what you're gonna get out of it. And that's another issue I wanted to bring up is, but as far as the time goes, don't stress out about the time, especially early on. Any amount of time is good when you're first starting out. but you're going to want to add time as it goes on, and I'll get into that later. So if you do it for a minute, that's better than not meditating at all. Sometimes I meditate for 10 breaths, whatever. Even one breath of one pointedness is better than nothing at all. But more time is not necessarily better. If you spend 5 minutes focused is better than an hour of wasted. But once you get into it, the focus on adding time will come naturally, and that is a good thing. And the 20 minutes that often that meditation groups are capped at is definitely not enough. And another person who's really opened my mind up about the time is called Jeffrey Brooks. I'll put a link in the description. He's excellent as far as giving some real advice on how to meditate. But the thing is, as far as the advice goes and the stories go, I really liked how Critical Condition talked about how she taught herself how to meditate. And she made up her own techniques, and some of the stuff she does is actually counterintuitive, or not, rather counter to the advice that they give. And here's the thing, she has an enjoyable experience that works for her, and she's making spiritual progress. What more do you want? So there's a lot of people that just follow the advice as it is, stay to your breath, don't follow anything else and everything, and that's a lot of them quit meditating, I hear, or they don't get anywhere. And by getting anywhere, I mean there are certain states of meditation which lead you deeper. They're called jhanas, and I absolutely believe in them. I am not very good at it. But it's something to shoot for, something to think about, but not something to obsess about. So you can have a great meditation experience that doesn't have the jhanas in it. That's okay. As long as you're enjoying your meditation, that is the number one thing you need to do to start. Once you get that foundation, that creates faith. That's something I didn't have before. Again, I was very skeptical as an atheist. And through meditation, I remember waking up one day, because I used to laugh at anything religious, and even Buddhism, and I just want the science aspect. I just want to rip out the meditation and throw the other religious nonsense away. And I found that I got this sense of, it's not just, the faith is hard to describe. It's not believing in the sky fairy. It's not believing in things that I don't understand or whatever. It's having a certain level of respect and reverence for things that I don't understand, for spirituality, and listening to other people's experiences, even if they sound outlandish. That's to me what faith is. It's the skeptical community has a lot of straw men when it comes to faith, and we get all of our science through our senses. That's all we have in all of our discoveries. We have our senses, and we have the idea that their reality is stable and that it can be measured, and that measurements in one area of reality will translate to other places. For example, we assume that the laws of physics are the same all around the universe. That's an assumption, can't be proved. Sure, the evidence points in that direction, and that's great. I love science. I think it has gotten pretty far. But there's another dimension to human life, and that's spirituality. And I feel the people, if they don't understand that, are missing out. So you don't have to believe in anything irrational or anything. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that I felt for a long time like I had to meditate in a rigid way. I read a lot of Zen books. Some of them are really good. I'm not going to knock any tradition or any kind of book right here, but I found that the rigidity, in some ways, and the discipline was good, but in the other ways, I feel like a lot of my meditations weren't doing so well. It felt like a chore, I guess I should say. It felt like a job. It felt, after I stopped meditating, I mean, I meditated, and then as soon as I got up from my meditation, it was great. But the actual experience of meditation often was very annoying. And a lot of meditators, I'm not going to repeat all of them, tell stories about how the mind wanders or whatever. But here's what I'm going to add to that. The mind wandering is not a big deal. It's not anything to freak out about. That's just adding more stress to your life. I talked to this guy, Zach, and he was talking about how he's a meditator, and he has a hard life, and he's got, everyone is like breathing down his neck. Everyone's telling him how to live his life. And meditation is the one place where he can do things the way he wants to. So in this video, I'm going to tell you, when you meditate, do whatever you want. Don't let me tell you what to do. If you want to meditate even rigid, go for it. But it is your experience, and you have to take ownership of that. So it can be whatever you want it to be, but the main thing about it is you want to focus on the techniques or whatever of making yourself happy. You can't force yourself to be happy, but it's like a plant. When you give it the right conditions, it's growing. So if that flower of bliss is growing within you, then I think you should keep watering it. And yeah, try other techniques, read the Buddhist sutras, try to find out what you're doing and how it maps onto what they're going through, but don't beat yourself up about your meditation is what I'm saying. Again, it's another focus on the past is like, wow, or even the present, I'm doing a terrible job, or in the future, like I'm not a good meditator. Those are all useless things. I mean, the idea is that when I started meditating, I found one of the first things I discovered was most of my thoughts were useless. They're pointless and they're meaningless. Even my feelings, totally meaningless. They're just peripheral to the time. They just like, now I have them, now I don't. And again, I'm not enlightened, whatever. I often get caught up in a lot of things, my own emotions and neurosis, but I have that underlying core of knowing these things, these surface defilements are not ultimately real. They're not stable, and you don't have to freak out about them. Even if you're freaking out, you don't have to freak out about that. Even freaking out is fine. Just realize that you have this bliss in the center, and you can always access that. Another technique I found that was particularly helpful to me was loving kindness meditation. I remember the first time that I had what I considered to be the first jhana experience was I was in a cafe and I was writing with my friends, and we're just writing, and one of my friends said something very sweet about us just pausing for a moment and think about how much we loved each other. And that came as a shock to me. I hadn't had a lot of female friends, and I didn't understand what it meant to have platonic female friendships. And I was in this writers group because I wanted to write better. So I was hanging out with these women and guys in order to become a better writer. But I was in a relationship, and I wasn't thinking about dating them or whatever. I was just, but I didn't even know if I wanted to be friends with them. Really, it was just like acquaintances for this writers group. And we said such sweet things about just thinking about how much we loved each other in a very pure, platonic manner that made me very happy. And that wasn't the state. That didn't get me to the jhana. But what it did is I remember going back to my house. I would sit in my meditation room and I stared at the wall. And I started to loving kindness meditation, which is basically you wish happiness for all beings. You start with the person that is closest to you, either yourself or your protector, a companion, and then you move down the line. You move to neutral people like the postman or cashier, someone that you don't hate nor love, and you just get further down. So you go, your yourself, your lover, your best friend, your good friends, down to all the way, if you can get there, to in order. So what you do is you take the love in the higher levels for yourself or whatever, and you bring it down. It doesn't have to be yourself, because a lot of Westerners hate themselves. So your benefactor, whoever, a parent you loved, if you did, somebody that you loved, and you just bring it all the way down to the people that you hate, the worst people ever. And that's what I was trying to talk about in my other video. Once you do this, it dissolves a lot of the hatred. A lot of the, my friends hate Trump and the supporters, but I don't hate them. Same thing with the Hillary crowd. I don't hate her. I don't hate her supporters. I don't hate anybody. I'm very angry at a lot of people. Or even the SJWs, the hate. You can bring that love to them, and it dissolves a lot of difficulties you have in your life, and you get a level of clarity. So I was doing that for my friend, my female friend, because she had said all these nice things, and I was like, may she be happy. And as soon as I said that to myself quietly, I had this feeling of love. And then what happened is I hadn't had Jeffrey Brooks where he said you need to drop the breath, but I was like also simultaneously focusing on my breath a little bit. But I just focused on that feeling in my chest, and every time I breathe in, I just focused on that. I stopped the loving kindness meditation and just went with the bliss. And that's exactly what you should do. And that's one thing I really firmly believe in. I mean, the techniques are just a way to get to the bliss. Once you get to the bliss, you need to drop the technique. It's just the bliss is your car. As soon as you get to the restaurant, you need to get out of your car. Just sitting in your car, not eating in the restaurant is not the way to go. So get to your destination and then drop your transport, drop your object, and go with the bliss and see where it takes you. And there's books on it and everything, but once you get to that bliss level, you're good to go. You've done most of the job. And again, so here's another thing is I had a story from a friend who had bliss, and he one time when he was meditating, he learned meditation through yoga. And then, so he meditated, got bliss for the first time ever, was amazed, went to work, went back home, meditated again, and did not get bliss. And he quit meditating. And that's, you can't quit meditating when you don't get the bliss every time. You need to stick with it. It'll get easier. You'll learn more. And you'll find that instead of being agitated and angry when you sit down, after a couple of minutes when I sit down, I go right into my object, the noise, the white noise, or my breath, or whatever technique, loving kindness you use, you just go right into that. It becomes a habit, and it becomes a lot easier to move in there. And therefore, that's why you need to keep meditating. But focus, do it your own way. Don't listen to me. Do it for as long as you want. Make your own schedule, and just be happy.